Hey, it's Deborah Boschert. Welcome to my studio. I'm really excited to give you a little bit of a tour. So my studio is in this space in our home. I live in a suburb of Dallas, Texas, and I'm excited to show you a little bit about me and my work and my studio. Come on in. So I'm an artist and I make what I call art quilt collages. So I have lots of my work hanging here in my studio. I have this diptych self-portrait. There's this one here with the ladder. And then there's another companion piece over here, another self-portrait with the tree. And then I have my landscape series here on this wall, and then lots of other work hanging on my design wall and throughout my studio. So my work is all about layering fabric, paint, and stitching. And I thought that that would be a good framework for me to sort of guide this studio tour. So we're going to talk about fabric, paint, and stitching. So let's first look at a little bit of my fabric stash. So I love combining commercial prints with original surface design fabric. So these are my commercial prints, my stash of commercial prints, stored by color. Here's my blacks and browns. I straightened them up just recently. Here's some greens and some more greens and just a few reds. You're starting to sort of see my typical color palette. Some blues and teals down here. So like I said, I love combining commercial prints with original surface design. And all of my work is created using the technique of raw edge fused applique, which means I actually have an additional stash of fused fabric, and that is all under my studio table here. So more bins sorted by color. So here's my yellow pre-fused fabric. So that means that these pieces already have fusible webbing on the back. And again, I'm storing those by color. So yellow, some reds and pinks, some browns, and a stray red that jumped out. So we'll put that back with the reds. So that is all of my pre-fused stash. I also have lots of workshop supplies in these bins under my studio table, because not only do I use this studio to create artwork, it's also my virtual classroom. So workshop supplies here, and kits and other workshop supplies over here. So that's sort of what I do fabric-wise. Let's now talk a little bit about paint. So like I said, I love to use paint to create original surface design fabrics, and I have some samples here that I pulled out for you. So these are just patterns created with stamping and paint. This is a rolling print. I really love this circle pattern. Here's another just motif that can be cut up and used in my art quilt collages. I love handwriting as a surface design element. So here's a green on green piece. And then this is actually a drop cloth from some painting that I did, and I'm definitely looking forward to incorporating that in some of my work at some point. So almost all of my work for surface design is created with acrylic craft paint. So here's some of my paints. I have more paints in my studio closet, which I am not going to show you. But here are a couple of the, just craft paints that I really love using. I love that it sits on the surface of the fabric, creates texture and layers. And since my work really is collage, this is what really works great for me. My favorite color combination of green and purple as a sample. So a lot of my work is made with original rubber stamps. So here's a couple of the rubber stamps that I use regularly and stored up in this bin. And then my favorite tool for adding paint to these rubber stamps is what I call a spouncer. So there is a box of my spouncers. That's a little bit of a peek of the fabric layer of my process. So last is the stitching, and you're seeing just a little bit of my stitching supply hanging here on the side of my shelf. These are all pearl cotton threads. A lot of them are variegated, and that is some of the kinds of thread that I really love for adding hand embroidery to my work. So some of my hand stitching threads there. But of course, I'm also going to do some machine stitching on my work, and here is my sewing machine. I stitch on a Janome 9450, and I love combining machine stitching, free motion quilting usually, with hand embroidery. And I actually have these pieces here that I'm beginning to think about working on this week. I have these several small landscape pieces with this sort of pink sky, and I'm thinking about adding some pink machine stitching to these pieces before I add the paint and hand embroidery layers. So here's more hand embroidery threads sorted by color, all of these little drawers sorted by color, as I mentioned, with embroidery floss and some pearl cotton and various other threads. You can see the red is overflowing here. And here's my golds and yellows, some metallic. So that is how I store the hand stitching threads that aren't hanging on the side of the shelf. Let me show you a little bit more that's on the design wall. So like I said, I'm working on these small landscape pieces. So you saw those small landscape pieces sitting on my sewing machine. Those are the same palette as this pink landscape. So I made these 20 by 30 inch landscape compositions, and then I made coordinating 5 by 7 inch smaller pieces. So here's this blue 20 by 30, and then here's 6 blue 5 by 7s in that same palette. So here's the pink 20 by 30, and then the pink ones over by my studio. And then here is this warm red, orange, and yellow 20 by 30, and the coordinating 5 by 7 pieces of that color palette are all done. So you can take a look at these 6 pieces, which totally combine the layers of fabric, paint, and stitching. This is a stamped motif with that acrylic paint that we were looking at. We've got hand stitching, hand embroidery, combined with machine stitching, and these are all mounted on 8 by 10. So I'm really enjoying working in this small format combined with that larger 20 by 30 size. A really interesting way of working both large and small, layering fabric, paint, and stitching, creating these original art quilt collages. There you have it. That is me and my studio. You can see more of my work, find links to all of my social media at my website, which is deborahstudio.com.